the recording's on now. That's good. And the slides I'll just get up. There's my diary. What else is in what I wanted to? So perhaps level 5. Okay. Our second finance session. So we know Emily hasn't had a chance to do anything at any point, never mind on this assignment. Nadia, have you?
I didn't do, I will not lie.
No, that's fine. That's completely understandable.
But
Are you okay?
I'm planning, I will start next week, hopefully.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, then I will work on it, and then if I need, I will give a shout.
Okay. And you are, yeah, please do, because our next session, like whenever you need to meet or if you want to talk about it. So,
yeah.
but Emily, I don't even think you'll be on it by then, do you? The next session, you'll still be finishing off Joe's.
I really need to get that one finished. I'm going to try.
Of course you do, before you start anything else.
I'm going to try and find some time at the weekend to just get it done, because it's hanging over me.
Yeah, and I know from the quality of your work as well that you do put a lot into it, because they're really, really good. Your assignments are really good. So. No, I know. Yeah, so it's not even like you just try and bash them out. You know, the quality of what you do is excellent. I'm sorry that work sounds. It doesn't necessarily sound like you feel very supported anyway.
It's just challenging for everybody at the moment, I think, but I will try and find some time to work on this, I think, over the weekend, and work on Joe's managing team.
And then we can
make a start on this at least before we have the last class.
Well, the last class, this is I mean, there's only 2 tasks.
Time, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's literally one-to-one time if you want to just go through, and almost if you wanted to make notes and do your own, so you can, like if you wanted to do a book one-to-one earlier in that day, if you finish Joe's one, maybe wait till you see if you finish Joe's. If you have, we'll book an hour and you could come up with exactly what you're going to be doing on each one of this.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Because I think then you'd feel more confident in approaching it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So we've looked at the first task in the last session that we did together, which was really about understanding the flow of money in the organisation and understanding, sort of how it all fits together and what the drivers are financially. In this one, we're going to look more at budgets, and we're going to look more at how we look ahead and manage those budgets. You will have to have a budget in here, and that doesn't mean it has to be complex in any way, shape or form. It could be fairly straightforward. It could be an operating budget for a small area of the business, the university, or it could be an event, a budget for putting on an event, a budget for doing a particular change. So it can be quite simple, but there does need to be a budget in here. So we're going to look today at task 2, which comprises of A and B, and you can actually change the order of it when you're writing it if you find it more helpful to put your budget in earlier on, because actually the budget in terms of the order of the tasks comes right at the end, but you don't have to do it that way. So just a quick question for both of you. Have you ever set up a budget at work?
No, never.
Have you got a budget that you could use or that you could ask for?
My manager, she she knows what is in the budget, and then I just let her know what we needed. So then she ordered for me, and then I can find something and I just take the purchasing card and use it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have no access. But she promised me, she said when she will do the finance, when the budget thing, whatever the allocated budget is, how she spent it in last 3 months. She said, you can sit with me, I can show you.
Okay. because you're gonna, yeah. Otherwise, I mean, you can make something entirely fictional up. So you could, like, quite simply have. I think I'm going to say in the support document that I've got for you. Is there a sample budget in there? I'm not sure if I did one. There might be. Have you got the?
I haven't got Moodle open at the moment, but I can open
Let me
it.
just open it up whilst you're all together and just check what we've got.
It's managed like so far away from me. I can't think.
Oh, I know, but do you know what? I think as well. That shows you a little bit about the style of trust in the organisation as well, because
central, yeah.
Well, at Aston Martin, I teach guys that are around mid-20s or early 20s. They've all got budgetary responsibility. Isn't that strange?
Mm.
And yet here in this organisation, even if you're quite senior, it tends to be sort of a little bit hidden almost, doesn't it?
That's it. I'm wondering whether even the faculty registrar has a budget to manage anymore, or whether that's done centrally, because registry is all centrally managed now. We're all part under the same thing. It's so, yeah, I can't think of. I'd have to use a hypothetical, like a.
Yeah, and if you do, it's fine. And the same with you, Nadia. And you know, if you need to use a hypothetical one, it's absolutely fine. It's the reason for using a real one is just that it helps, doesn't it? Because you actually understand what you're talking about, and it's quite nice to see. Here we go.
There you go.
Yay! So it's got to be. So in it, I think now is it a 12-month budget? So formulate a budget with written justification. So it says it may be an annual one, a quarterly one, or a monthly one. And it can be around a specific thing. So I've put an example of a funded project that requires some resource, and it's about putting on some events. So how much they got in, what they spent things on, and so you can say whether it's on budget or not. So do you see what I mean? So that's really straight. You know, you should, hopefully, would you feel comfortable making something up?
Yeah.
About a training program. I mean, Nadia, you're all in your previous role, you talked about something where you were looking at sort of the use of chemicals or something, where there was a training program for the cleaning staff.
Yeah, I made a like last summer when I was it was a cleaning of the deep cleaning end of term thing. Then we need more staff. So then I create a sheet like how many hours we needed for rooms, and then how much it will cost to the department, and then we send that proposal to the management, and then it's approved.
Okay, so I think that could be the basis of your budget then. So that could be fairly straightforward. Emily, I think this is going to be one of the easiest modules you've ever done. No, seriously. I mean, the ones I've taught you, I feel so sorry for you, because they just felt like they were the same module, just with lots of different names, weren't they?
There was a lot of similarities between.
Oh, it was awful, wasn't it? I'm teaching them again. I'm dreading it. I'm going to have to go through and do something to jazz it up or something.
Or to do something different, I have to admit. like
I know, and that's why I know people don't necessarily feel comfortable with finance, but I tell you what, at least it's different.
That's it.
So task one, so we're still on, we're just finishing off task one here, but there's not much to it left. So we're talking about budgeting and the difference between budget setting and financial forecasting. Have you ever heard of a financial forecast before?
I've heard of it, but I can imagine what it is.
Go on, explain what you think it might be.
Like a projection, a prediction, or some kind of like, well, I suppose I'm thinking like weather forecast. It's like a prediction of what the weather is to come, but what, like, is it a kind of estimated, but an educated estimate of like? Yeah,
absolutely.
Kind of, yeah.
So based on that, we'd probably look at like, think about, so if John Latham and his team are doing this for looking at sort of future income for the organisation, what sort of things are they going to forecast? How can they, like if they're looking at about forecasting income, how can they do that? What sort of variables would they look at?
Income. So income will be like student fees.
So what factors will affect the student fees?
Yeah, so how big the next intake of students is going to be, how many international students that
might the composition, even things like the number of 18-year-olds has been quite a big concern recently, because actually there was a dip for a while, and then actually when it comes back up, the 18-year-olds aren't necessarily that some of them are, say, there's quite a high influx of Polish people where the 18-year-olds are actually not necessarily first generation, who wouldn't necessarily go to uni as well. So it's sort of almost looking at what the composition of potential, what the pool is, and that then helps us understand the potential forecast. And you're right, like the impact of international students, whether Brexit's going to impact it. There's a lot going on. So that sort of forecasting is looking ahead with some educated predictions. And then obviously we've got things that we wouldn't have foreseen, like the current pandemic, like the debacle with A levels. Do you know what I mean? So there's all these sorts of like people potentially deferring because they don't want an online uni experience. And then we've got, so that's sort of, so forecasting is predicting using as much evidence as we can. How does that contrast? So a budget, if we're setting a budget, what does that involve? Because that's quite different.
So that is more about how much money is available to you and what you need to spend it on.
Yeah. So it sort of feels more operational, that does, doesn't it? Financial forecasting has the implication that it's a bit of a long term ahead. So we're looking at, so operationally, we're looking at how much money we're making from sales, what the costs are going to be. So like how many the tutors are we going to have to pay to develop the course? Is there a sort of registry cost, all the different costs involved in delivering in it. So it's sort of the execution of the plan, if you like, and the detail around it, where the forecasts are more estimates about what we're going to be using going ahead, what's coming in, what's going out. So they're a bit higher level, whereas the budget is more something that we can actually measure against. Yeah. So this 1 point here, this 2.1, really, really straightforward. And you could put an example of how that would work at the uni.
Okay, yep.
Are you comfortable with that as well, Nadia? Just check if you...
Are you on mute?
Oh. You all right with that, Nadia? Your thumbs up or thumbs down? Unmute yourself. Is it all right?
Yeah.
Good.
I'm trying to connect with my computer, but I couldn't. That's why I carry on with my phone. It's fine.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Good. Okay. If at any point you're not okay with anything, you just stop me. Okay.
Okay.
So this is really, so it is really straightforward. Then we're going to look at how we can set a budget. Okay, so there's a couple of different options. The one is that we look historically at what we spent before. So we look at if we delivered this course to this many learners or students, or we delivered accommodation to, again, a certain number, what do we need? How did that, what were the costs involved in that? And we could even say, so if we're looking to scale it up, based on that, we know that for each learner, we're going to have to buy them more textbooks or more access to certain resources. So we can add an additional amount for the scenario to build it up based on how many learners we've got coming in. What's the benefit of using historic data?
It's real. Like,
yeah, we know, we've done it, we've tried and tested it, it's worked. So what else? So it's real, it's happened. Is there anything that's a downside of using it?
I suppose if the variables, like it might have changed, like I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. So right, okay. If we look backwards, we're not likely to innovate because all we do is repeat patterns. Okay, so if we look backwards, when we delivered our face-to-face teaching, we did it on this resource base, on this thing, then actually we've got one challenge, which is the current scenario, the whole sort of way in which things are delivered have changed. So we can't actually do that because if we've got to put certain measures in place, if we've got to do more cleaning, if we've got to do more this, that and the other, actually our cost base is fundamentally, we're in a different position now. So historical is more limited because we're not repeating the same. But this one, so I think that's particularly important now, whereas actually if we were doing this last year, it wouldn't have mattered at all because it would have been less of a situation. There might have been some more new processes or things, but it wouldn't have mattered too much. The key thing is here, we're not looking at innovating or improving because we're just repeating if we're not careful. So to innovate and improve, what I'm thinking here is, for example, with the CU group, what they're looking to do now is with online learning, they get to deliver lectures across all the campuses through one tutor, because that makes sense, doesn't it? If you're doing it online anyway, does it matter? You don't have to have the tutor that's down the road. But actually, if we did it historically, we'd do 3 different cohorts on 3 different locations. We'd do the same. So we'd actually have 3 times the cost, wouldn't we? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So historical doesn't really promote innovation. Now, next one we've got is called zero budgeting. So if we were a new organisation, or if we're quite sort of high tech, or we've got a new project, this is where we do a budget from nothing to start up with. So what we're doing is we are looking at building our cost base up. So we're saying we're going to start off by, and we're looking for the best prices for everything. So we're actually putting a budget together from scratch. How do you think, how effective do you think that would be?
Oh God.
How would you feel about doing that if you were asked to do it? So you've never had to put a budget together before, and they said, what we'd like you to do, we want to do this special project where we're training everybody in this. So can you cost it out for us? What would your response?
You wouldn't know where to start. Yeah. You'd have to do a lot of research, and you wouldn't know whether necessarily what your, the costs that you found were accurate, and you wouldn't really know what your budget needed to be until you'd actually kind of done it.
Yeah. And actually, so the benefits of it are it stimulates a sense of getting best value for money. It involves real ownership in actually looking at stuff, looking at different options. So you get a sense of feeling really connected with what you're setting, which can be, from a departmental point of view, very, very motivating because you're bought into it. So rather than just being told you've got to work at it, you've established the cost yourself. So that's a real plus. On the negatives, though, you need to have the experience. Otherwise, you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know what you're missing. So it can be quite nerve-wracking to do it because actually it feels outside of your comfort zone. So there's some pros and cons on that. And actually, depending on the complexity of it, it could just take so long to put together, couldn't it? Because you just, as I say, almost. That's why historic tends to be something that's used with a level of updating, but not zero is very time consuming, but could be very, very good value because you could look at the best supply value for everything. And then flexible budgeting. This is where we're actually looking at adjusting the budget. So we put it together for 3 months and then we look at changing it for the next 3 months. And the benefit of this is actually it allows us to be real with the budget. So actually if there's a huge hike in prices, then we're able to shift upwards on that. So each one, as I've mentioned, I've talked to you a little bit about the pros and cons. The main ones are historic versus zero. Flexible is more of an adjustment as you go along, just to make sure it's actually still working. So you okay with like what I've, there's a whole, in the support sheet I've put all the detail in there, but I'd like you to adapt it and just talk about how you'd feel about doing it, or, you know, in your area, what you think would work best. Very, very unlikely that you'd ever use zero unless it was a very low risk project, really. So when we're putting together a budget, there are different things that are going to impact on it. Firstly, how much money have we got available? So again, we've got lots of ideas on the fact sheet here. So what's the driver at the moment for if we're looking to put anything together, what sort of, what's the consideration if you were having to try and put a budget together and you were trying to get it approved? What do you think the environment is like at the uni?
Health and safety.
Okay, so if it's sort of potential risk, they're more likely to spend on that, aren't they? Because they're more fearful of potentially getting sued or fined. Yeah, basically fined, or potential negative PR. Any other things? What if it's a nice to have project? How do you think that would go at the moment? Do you think they'd be behind you, or do you think they'd tell you to go away? I think what I'm getting at here is we're in a climate at the moment where they're really concerned about income, aren't they? And therefore controlling expenditure. So how come the university is spending so much on their CU online proposition? Because the university is spending a huge amount of money, isn't there, on their online degrees? Why are they doing that if it's not currently making their returns?
Because in future they are expecting the more students, they attract more, and how long it will, because with this pandemic the situation is changed everywhere.
Yes.
Like the way of teaching, and then the classroom concept is that was already dying, but now is all the universities, they are going for online. They just record and then put on the system, and then student whenever they can listen them.
Yeah.
So it will be more popular in future. So that's why they want to attract more student. Is they are spending more, but they are expecting afterward,
Yeah,
definitely reward of it.
so it's a more of a long-term investment, but they definitely see it giving them a competitive advantage. And I think Ian Dunn's always had the vision for the online degrees that if you do a Coventry University degree, that you can do it any way that suits you. So in theory, you could do it on campus, and that could be on a campus overseas. It could be in London, Scarborough. It could be any of the CU campuses, or you could do it online, or you could do it as a blend of both. And so I think that's always been a vision, but it's very much about their long-term future. And they've expected, I mean, the costs for creating the online degree are phenomenal because they put a lot of resource into it. They've got a media team, they've got project managers, they've got a whole team that they've sort of almost recruited.
Sorry, everybody.
Hey, hi, don't be sorry, it's fine. I've recorded it as well.
I'm on my phone because
I
don't know what's going on with that.
Ah, well, just thank you for coming, and I'll put a link on. And what I'm going to do for our next session, I'm going to book a one-to-one with each of you, like for an hour or so, and just run through the assignment for you. Does that sound all right? So Emily, I'll do that for you as well, and then that gives you a chance. Okay, I think that will work. Okay. Yes. It depends on where the money's coming from, and actually if it's a fund that they've got maybe from the European Union or something like that, it may mean that they're able to do more with it without getting the returns. So this comes on to returns. Are we going to get our money back? And actually the university will still be building, won't it, even though it's talking about costs, because the income there, they're borrowing money from pension pots, not our pension pots, but actually it's still, they've got a very much a long-term perspective on the growth of the university, but it's just contrasted with the short-term dip in income. So if it was a particular project, they'd be looking at when can it make money? So that's the break-even point, or the payback period. So how many years would you expect for something to then get the returns? And at the end of it, could we work out, is it going to make us a loss or is it going to make us a profit? When organisations look at payback periods, how long do you think they expect? I'll give you an example. Morrison's were very late to the market with their delivery vans, because it's a big infrastructure to actually get the vans in place, to get the whole infrastructure for online shopping. How long do you think they expected it to take them to recoup the money for doing their delivery service? So this is Morrison's when they invested in all the vans and the online shopping. How long do you think they expected it to take to get their money back? Go on, someone just name a amount of time.
I've no idea. Years, probably. No.
Yeah, years. Go on, be a bit more specific. How many years?
3 years.
5 years? I think that's a long time, don't you?
Yeah.
But actually, what is the consequence of them not doing it?
They wouldn't survive.
Well, it's a competitive response, isn't it, really? So do you know anything? I do like supermarket examples. Have you heard about what Aldi are doing now? They're doing something a bit different apart from delivering in the shop, shopping in the shop. Not very different, but a little bit different.
Have they put themselves on Deliveroo?
No, they're no. What they're doing they're doing a click and collect. So basically, you know, like I always think it's the ideal job because you just sit in a shed, don't you, and just pack people's cars up and you don't have to talk to anyone. So I think it sounds really good. But in Aldi, they don't even have a shed, I don't think. They just basically, you park in a special car slot, like car parking place. You order in advance and they come out to your car and that you've already ordered it in advance. But what would the cost of them doing that be?
The time of one person going around and picking up the stuff.
But actually, aside from that, it's not very costly, is it? They're not having to buy any vans. And the speed that the people there after work probably doesn't take them very long, does it? Because they're like properly managed, aren't they, in terms of like having to do everything really fast.
Yep.
But also, I think if you think about, because what they've done is they did it with one store, and I think it was in sort of around Nuneaton way, because one of my students is an Aldi store manager in Coventry, and he was saying they were doing it, trialing it, and they've rolled it out to 20 stores now. And the reason they've done that, imagine the Christmas shops are going to be like, I don't know, 150 quid, £200 shops, aren't they, even at Aldi? And if you've got people who will not go into a supermarket at the moment, but like Aldi, if they do that, then they're saving those shops, aren't they? They're saving that shopping basket budget. Does that make sense, that income?
Yeah.
But it's not very costly for them, really. And actually, it builds on their experience of speed, which I think they're really good at. So actually, in terms of, there's a risk sometimes in not doing things as well as doing things. So that's why we've talked about the online degree and saying, look, even though they're costly, Coventry University is a monster. And I mean that in the best way, in the sense of, it's huge, it's an animal that needs feeding, and if we slow down its growth, it can only lose money. So that's why they have to grow and grow and grow, don't they, all the time? And if they can't grow with physical, like online physical students, they then need to grow their online market. So there is a risk if they don't grow, if they don't maintain that growth momentum. Does this all make sense? Like this sort of, these are just different considerations when you're looking at actually spending money, because it isn't always about, are we immediately going to get it back? Sometimes it's about, what's the vision for the organisation? How do we differentiate ourselves? Is it on brand? Does it contribute to the student experience? Does it reduce our risk of health and safety, legislation? So one of the things that you'll be looking at in this assignment is where there are changes between what the prediction of the expenditure is and what actually happened, because sometimes budgets can be, even when we're looking ahead, our income isn't quite what we thought it was going to be, and things cost us more. So there are different reasons why that budget might not be what is planned. Chloe, on this, you've got to write a budget for this section, but no one else. Do you actually have a budget that you've got access to, Chloe? There. She's still there. She's gone, hasn't she?
Yeah,
No, I think she is not here.
Okay, that's fine. I'll go back to my slides. Because I was just going to suggest you made it up. If not, if in doubt, just make it up. Okay. So we've got different reasons why budgets might be less or more than we think. Have you got any ideas? Have you got any ideas what might change? So why costs might be higher or lower than what you've got planned? So let's think about a budget that you might have. Why might the people costs be higher?
If it's like, if there's delays, if it starts to be extended, like if it was a project, for example, or like, you know, like construction of a building or something.
Yeah.
Like if it was extended that it wasn't going to be finished on time, or you know, I don't know.
No, but that happens a lot. So that you see a big example. I mean, I think they redid the EastEnders set a year or two ago, and that was massively over budget. It's because it took longer, it was more complex than they thought, there were issues with the land, I think, that they didn't predict. So anything where you don't necessarily know the full situation beforehand, there may be more technicalities, there may be reasons people can't access things, there might be, and that might then encroach on other costs, because it might be that we need licenses for longer, we need to rent equipment for longer. So you see, they all have knock-on effects, don't they, if the project duration is longer than we think. And then actually the income could change as well. So even if we've got an agreed pot of money, if suddenly, like actually with the cost reductions at Coventry Uni, suddenly that budget might not be agreed anymore, or the resources might not be agreed. So there's lots of reasons why budgets might go up or down, or aspects of that budget. So here are some. So the next thing we're looking at what we'd do if things go up or down. So materially, what might you buy? So I can think of for Nadia, what materials do you use?
We definitely we have a stock in for the accommodation for the domestic staff.
Yeah.
Like at the minute, the most worrying thing is if like bookers or some other material suppliers, if they close down, so how we survive.
Yeah.
So the other thing we are doing at the minute is if we have to close the building, is like a strict lockdown, and then student, they are not able to come out from their rooms. So what kind of like kits we have to make for each person?
Yeah.
So we are stocking that at the minute.
Yes. Yeah. And all, even things like, because in accommodation you're going to have even things like mattresses or bedding, or you know, there's going to be all sorts of things there that so some of it could be through theft, and that's why things like I think Sports Direct did the frisking, didn't they, of everybody as they're leaving. Amazon do the same, where they're making sure there's not, people aren't stealing. Some of it could be poor quality, so actually you have to buy it more often. Can you think of any other reasons what might change? So a supplier might be closed down, which again puts you in a difficult position. Any other reasons why materials might be different? It's got theft, quality, supplier arrangements. There's quite a few things there. So have a think about, and I this could even be things like office-based materials, like printing paper or things. Do you know? So you can, Emily, use this for you as well. Labour variances. Oh, so this is sometimes the quality of who you ask to do a job. So I know it's in the CU group, they've tried to use student ambassadors as much as possible, and sometimes they're not the right people to do the job. Some people will be paid overtime, others aren't. So does this happen with grade bandings at the university? Do you get overtime if you're a certain grade, but not if you're others grades, or how does it work? Do you get overtime?
We can. We have to have. It's like an. It's
Is it
by
pre-approved?
agreement though. Yeah. It's
Ah.
like we can't just do overtime as and when we need to. It would need to be like agreed in advance, and it's very rare.
Yes. Okay. And that's it's a really difficult situation when you start, when you're under-resourced and people are used to having overtime. It starts, if you're not careful, to become normal to them, doesn't it? And actually start to rely on that income. And then if you take it away from them, it's a really, really difficult one, actually. So if you can get away with not doing that in the first place, it's much better. Okay, so have you ever been in a position where you've seen roles that have been recruited for with a lower grade to replace them, or not? No one. Well, Chloe's had this. I know she's probably not still not with us, but she's doing two people's jobs at the moment. No wonder she's not here. She's doing all her other jobs, the poor thing. But that's another example, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of like, yeah. So actually, that's a way of resume slideshow. Yeah. So that could be one, and then we could also have issues. Right. This is so changes in price or cost savings. Right. Okay. So we might get some cost reductions at the moment if businesses are sort of keen to make sure, or even on some of our costs, like our lighting, our heating, etc. We might be reducing some costs at the moment because the buildings aren't necessarily fully functioning. Probably won't be much, but there will be some cost savings. However, our fixed costs are those that we can't really change for very much because they're just standard. So they're likely to be the same. And then sales variances, these are what the business is really concerned about at the moment, aren't they? Because of Brexit, because of people delaying doing degrees. They were trying to get more postgraduates to carry on studying at the university to try and up the income from that way. But another thing that they were concerned about, I think it was called the Alga Review. Have you heard of this?
I don't think I have.
No.
This was potentially where actually fees were going to come down.
No, I've not heard of it.
Yeah, and this was a big threat. I don't know if it still is. But it meant that so at the moment we've got a fee band which is for the main university, and then CU group is cheaper. I think the Alga Review was about really reducing the fees to more like the CU group's fees, which if you couple that with less students, it's spelled AUGAR, and it was a review of fees and just making sure people got value for money. But if you look at timesing that by less students, you've got a very different income picture, haven't you? So you've got to work out what to do, because I think I'm sure at one of John Latham's road shows, he was saying that actually for each undergraduate student, the domestic one, they lose money, don't they, on every student, like 100 quid or, it's not masses, but actually it starts to be thousands, doesn't it, if you are reducing the amount they're paying. So I know it sounds very dry, but actually it's really interesting because it just shows if certain things go up and then certain things go down, the picture doesn't work. And then another cost that's really bothering them at the moment is the cost of pensions, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're trying to do stuff about that and change it to be more proactive to reduce that, because that is really killing them, I think. Okay. So did you sort of, do you get what I'm talking about when I'm sort of mentioning those sort of things? Do you get the examples that are used?
Yeah.
And they have. I mean, I've seen in the CU group where they have someone's left and they choose not to recruit them when we come to labour variances, or if they do downgrade the role, and that is a cost saving, isn't it? But it's not necessarily what's required for the job. So it's it's conflicted really, isn't it? Because you're talking about creating a fantastic student experience, but also you want to do it at the lowest cost possible. So that's why in terms of even things like tutors or lecturers, you try and recruit your PhD students to teach, because you can do that and pay them 15 quid an hour rather than paying an experienced lecturer, say 40 grand a year or something like that. So, you know, they're trying to be smart with what they're paying out. So any other examples that you can think where variances could occur or have occurred in your experience? I won't do a virtual whiteboard, or just ask you each for an idea as to something you've seen where it's cost more or less than you thought, and why. Anyone?
I can't think of any examples of that, a workplace thing.
I just wondered about one for you, where a process has changed. So, for example, if there's been a process where people are doing things more virtually, where actually there's been a less of a physical cost involved in terms of even producing paperwork and folders and things.
That makes sense, yeah.
And I know it's only micro, but actually if you scale it across the university,
like external examiners not having to pay their travel and everything for
yeah,
and...
I actually think the COVID situation presents here quite a few examples of reduced costs, because of the sort of travel policies have changed as well, haven't they? Physical printing. I do think buildings have been put down on sort of low maintenance as well, haven't they, at the moment? So their running costs aren't as expensive.
Exams being online would be a massive one, because think about all those invigilators they pay for like 2 weeks.
Oh, they do, and they love it, don't they? I also really like them actually. They come with that like boiled sweets and chat to each other, don't they? I bet they've been gutted.
Oh no.
Because I don't think they get paid much either, but they love that sense of self-importance.
They probably do, no.
They're probably like on 8 quid an hour, but they roll out of retirement, don't they, and come in for a couple of weeks every year.
Yeah.
And they keep them, they're the same people every year, because I've been in them, and they're really nice. But yeah, that's another one. However, and I'll tell you what's interesting, I do like costings because it makes sense of everything, and it makes sense why people are stressed, because what that will have done, it would have put so much extra pressure on the lecturers, because they'll have had to come up with a different way of doing the exam. You know, how they're going to do it, they're going to do it so they'll have had to change the exam paper so it's open book, and it's over maybe a 14-hour period. Do you know what I mean? They've had to think about every way that they're not disadvantaging the students. But actually then it potentially increases their workload, because they already had the assessment procedures pretty much were probably already signed off, weren't they, before this happened? And they're going to have had to review them. So that wouldn't have cost the uni anymore, because these people are paid fixed costs. And actually, even if they're hourly paid, they're not paid anymore, because they're paid for teaching hours. So they're not paid for marking, they're not paid for exam preparation. So actually the costs are exactly the same, except they're not paying invigilator costs. But somewhere, someone is tearing their hair out because they didn't plan to do that extra 20 hours of work they're not being paid for.
That's bad, yeah.
So you see what I mean? So actually, just because we're not paying for something doesn't mean there isn't a cost involved to someone somewhere.
Yeah.
I think this is really important as well, because I tell you what, that means employee turnover goes up, because job satisfaction, if you've got somebody who's doing that sort of role and they're thinking, I was thinking of retiring anyway, that's enough, I've had it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think as well at the moment, like there's something going on where they know nobody's going to leave their jobs, because the job market at the moment is so unstable. Or I think, like, take my position for example, I wouldn't leave my job at the moment, because getting another admin job could be pretty difficult.
Yes.
And I think they kind of know that, so they can do things like extend our working hours and make us work till 10 o'clock and make us work on a Saturday, because they know we're going to go, oh, all right then, I suppose better than not having a job.
Yes.
Sorry,
Is
just that out there.
No, I agree with you, and I think these are the sort of things where, and actually, I think they're aware that's happening, and that's potentially why they're doing a little bit more over Christmas as a way of giving back, because things will turn around. I'm not saying anytime soon, but when they do, we're going to have to, you know, there's got to be something in the bank for goodwill. And actually, it's a really good reason not to, as well, with cost cutting, isn't it? Not to promote people, because we're in a really difficult environment. So it's this idea of just be grateful for what you've got, isn't it? But that's not good enough if you're working really hard.
Yep.
And actually, another way that they're currently getting more out of their money is, Emily, if you've not got time to do your assignment as agreed, or your work, you know, on the job learning, which is part of this requirement and is a day a week, that extra day a week, they are getting that as extra, aren't they?
Yeah.
But actually, the only person who's paying for that's you.
Because I have to do my assignment on the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's what I mean. So this is
which
also,
is okay. It's a little thing, but yeah, it's me.
But it's a contract. It's a psychological contract. Yeah. And actually, if they then offered you to do some more professional development, in the back of your mind, you're going to think, bloody hell, you know what? I know what happened last time. Yeah. You know, I'm not sure I want to do that. I'm not sure I want to give up all that time again.
Yeah.
Okay. So the idea is, if in this imaginary world where you ever get access to a budget, that you actually have some way of itemising what you're going to have in there versus what you actually spend, because then we've got to know what's different. And it's not to beat you up with, it's just for future learning, because actually otherwise, if we've got a historic budget and we've never measured against it, then we're just always using the same inaccurate data. So in your budget, the idea is that you'd have this simple budget down, and then you talk about what variances happened, and you talk about like why that happened. So the spending on a project, for example, if you were doing a training project, or if you were doing something, so you're stimulating some level of change, it might even be an online training event, but the costs could be less, but that's not because you've done well, it's because less people engaged with it. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes it's actually the headline figures just don't give us the picture of actually we've got to where we want to. It just means we haven't. So you need to have a think about the budget itself might have been cut. So what I want you to do is look at what the variance is. So in this imaginary situation you're going to put together, you talk about that's how much was set, that's how much was spent, and on some things create a small variance and just explain what it was, why it occurred. And then on a future question, you have to explain what you had to do to justify it. And actually, if it's next to nothing, the answer will probably be nothing. It was fine. But it's just showing that you can track, you don't just put it together. So I have got some examples on here. So it might be someone's, so for example, we've got a 20 grand income for this project. This was on somebody's assignment actually. So this is like based on, I think it was on, you know, CUSE, is it? The entrepreneurial area of the business where they do training and the social enterprises. They've got a 20 grand budget for a series of events. They've got a project administrator and she had to do a lot of overtime. And because of that, they paid her significantly more. So that meant if you've got brackets around something, when it's numbers, it means it's minus. So that's why it's got the brackets around the 750. Because the okay. And then actually, in terms of the marketing, if we go down to that, they had put a budget down for 2,500, but they spent less because they were able to give some of that work to somebody in the member of the team. So even though they paid us £750 more than they thought, in some ways they've saved £250 because, yeah, they've done it internally. Room bookings, they did less workshops, so they only paid half the amount of money they were expecting for that. Refreshments, again, were halved because they only had half the number of delegates and workshops. And then facilitators, again, half because they only ran half the number of workshops. So you see, it's quite straightforward, isn't it? But all you've got to do is build in some things where it hasn't quite gone to plan, and then you explain why.
Mm-hmm.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And then when that happens, what you've got to do is work out how you're going to report it. So who you'd have to tell. So going up a level, and what level a tolerance is like, what is okay. So if it was like less than 50 quid or less than 500 quid, it might be fine. But actually, if you start to be talking, you sort of like £10,000 above budget or under budget, what needs to happen then? Does it need to get reapproved? Does it need to be escalated? And then environment, this is a word that I'd only heard of in this course. This is the idea of sort of almost saying, well, we can shift that from that pot to another pot. In terms of, so in the university, the way that would work, the CU group has CU Coventry, CU London, CU Scarborough. CU Scarborough are paying for the development of a management leadership degree. Okay, only CU Coventry are now using it for their full-time learners, so they haven't actually paid for it. And when I said to Barjan, asked me, sort of line manager there, can you write the assignments for this management leadership degree? And I said yes, but can you pay me? And he said no, because CU Scarborough need it for their online degree, so you can do it for them and just get it, it's included in the total budget. So in other words, it's like this idea that we can use stuff from other people's budgets. Does that make sense? We shift it around a bit. So if we haven't got the budget for something, we can then get another part of the business to pay for it. Have you ever heard of that happening? Or do you think I'm just, does that sound silly, the example I gave?
No, I understand the example, definitely. I can't think of an example where that's happened, but
yeah, and it doesn't matter because you don't have to talk about this, but it is really this idea of sort of, in your scenario, what I'd do is I'd keep it so simple. I'd have a really simple launch event, or I'd have a simple training program, and I'd keep it quite close to budget, so you can actually say at 250 quid out, the person, I would share this with my line manager, but actually no action would need to be taken because that was within the tolerance, and then that keeps it that simple. So I'd make it not that complicated. So does that sound okay for that one? You're just going to keep it really easy, but you're going to explain that you know what to do. However, if it was thousands of pounds, before it even got authorised, we'd have to get it reapproved at a more senior level. And that's what you say for that.
Okay.
So again, really straightforward. But I think with this, what would be good, even if before, you know, when I book the next hours in, if you just get a chance to go through it and think about your own examples beforehand. And I don't mean spend lots of time on it, but then I can add to it and just make sure you've done enough to answer it. Okay. So in this task, you're going to come up with your budget and justify it. So what I'd like you to do, it says for the next financial year, but you don't have to do it for that. It could be an annual, a quarterly or a monthly forecast, or it could be like a financial business case. So send this, go for the next financial year, but you don't have to. As I say, it could just be a project that you're looking at, a specific thing, and I think that's the easiest to do. So what you do is, before you write it, you simply give a story. So you explain something's happening within your area. You're looking at, so for example, it might be refurnishing a number of student accommodation rooms, or it might be introducing a new training program. So something really straightforward. And then you present your budget as a table, and that's all you've got to do. So you do it as a table, and I'd keep it to 1 page. Really simple, but do it so it's got some level of complexity. So it's sort of got at least, I don't know, say 10 things on there, because otherwise you haven't got enough to talk about. But you need to put some words in there to explain what the situation is, and then you put a table in there, and then you talk, then it allows you something to talk about on the changes that have gone up or down. But you can see at the beginning of these slides, I'd suggested that you put this in your assignment earlier on, because if we go right back to the beginning, here we go. If you put your budget at the beginning of this question, you can then explain the variances, can't you? But if you don't, you're talking about variances for a budget that doesn't exist. Does that make sense? So I would move 2.3 up to, I'd do task 2B, which is the budget, before task 2A. So I'd introduce your budget first, and then you can talk about what impacted that budget in terms of budget management, what corrective actions were taken, and what reporting you did. It sort of doesn't make sense to me in that order. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then flicking back down, I have in the workbook, I've given you examples. You've got that example there of a budget as well. So yeah, there you go. I think that's the one that's in the workbook as well. So this was just for a particular training budget that they'd got for a particular project. So just do something really nice and easy. Only one source of income, which is the amount that's been allocated, and lots of expenditure that goes up and down each month. I've got another one there. That is from a oh no, that's from a different source. I think it was, I had got a student who worked at Wolverhampton Uni though, and his looked quite similar to that. So this one was, he did it over 3-month periods, so grants that were coming in. But again, you know, that's the level of complexity we want. We'll see. You see, there's quite a few brackets there that show it's a minus figure. So you know, the variance for grants, they got 30 grand less than they thought they were going to. So it's just they spent in terms of rent more than they thought they were going to. They bought more drugs than they thought they were going to. So it sort of shows what the impact of that is. So they can be presented in quite different ways. I think that's probably the easiest way to present it, but that's a different one if you wanted to do it over a period of months. Another one that was presented by one of my students. This was a student in the NHS, and just talked about at a very high level what was bought in for each month. So high level for this, or you know, just a small table. So you're going to be all right with making something up?
Yeah.
Both of you?
Yeah.
Think, Emily, you can be all right?
I think so.
Just Google it and change it.
We'll try. Yeah.
Just in doubt.
You're recording this, Anna.
I know, but change it. I did say change it as an example. So I know this is a bit of work, but actually I don't think in principle it's that hard, because we're going to keep our budget really easy. So we started off by talking about budget setting and financial forecasting. The forecasting is what John Latham talks about. The budgeting is what gets passed to your area to work towards.
Yeah.
We talked about budget setting approaches, and the main ones were historic, what we've already used, which isn't going to be relevant now. Basis 0, which takes an age to do and a lot of experience, but is more lean and is better to do if you can. Then we talked about factors on budget management. Well, at the moment, we've got a big reduction on income, haven't we? So we've got a massive thing on cost control, but that's conflicted with this idea of being the biggest and the best in the future. So that's why we're allowed to get away with things that possibly on a cost focus you wouldn't be able to. Then we talked about corrective actions. This is where we identify we've spent more or we've spent less, and why we have and what we need to do. And then the reporting procedures is who do we tell and what do they need to do to make sure we can still go ahead depending on the scale of it. And then the final bit was this 1-page budget that you're going to come up with that I've suggested that you do at the start of task 2, and then you can talk about it in the rest of task 2. So that's it for the talk content for this. As I say, what I'm going to do is it all right with you if I give you an hour each, set them up?
Yeah.
Do you feel that would be useful?
Sounds good, yeah.
I have
think
no
so, yeah.
expectations that you've done anything in advance, okay? So please don't feel any pressure whatsoever. So it's not to add to pressure, it's literally to give you some focus time where we talk about how you're going to approach it. So you can make notes. So I'll set those up for our next thing. And if the timing doesn't work for you, just let me know and I'll sort out another time, okay? I think this isn't that hard. But that I'm not doing it, am I? What's your thinking?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
You always say
Same.
that actually till you start doing it.
No, it looked like, because I was not expecting that. I was expecting some. Obviously, this is for
level. It's
So started, then I feel like ours goes at the minute is everything in the air kind of.
yeah, and also I think you probably expect ratios and things like that, and there's all these sorts of calculations. This isn't about that. This is about understanding on a high level how the numbers work.
Yeah.
And from a manager point of view, this is what you'd need to know for running a budget and running an area. And actually, in another organisation, you'd have to do this. It's really weird. You don't.
Yeah.
But I do think this means if you do go for a role somewhere else where it has got budgetary responsibility, you could talk about understand. So look, I haven't practically done it, but I have worked on a module where we had to talk about different variances. We talked about so you understand the language and can be quite honest. The first time you do it, you'd need a bit of help, but at least it's not from scratch. Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions before we sign off?
No.
I can't think of anything.
You have a productive afternoon, Emily.
You.
I'll get back to work. It's very nice to see you both. I'll send you some invites, okay, for the next session. And anything I can do to help you on this. Don't be afraid of this one because it's actually okay, and I'll work with you on it. All right.
All right.
Okay, lovely to see you. See you soon.
Nice.
Thanks, Hannah. Bye.
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 Bye, Emily.